On December 20th, 1944, Luxembourg City was thick with tension as the Battle of the Bulge erupted across the Ardennes. In his headquarters, General Omar Bradley held a telephone receiver so tightly his knuckles paled. On the other end of the line, Dwight Eisenhower, calm, deliberate, and unyielding, delivered a command Bradley could hardly believe. Because of the crisis unfolding in Belgium, the American 1st and 9th Armies were being transferred to British command under Field Marshal Bernard Law Montgomery. It was, to Bradley, an intolerable humiliation. His voice cracked with anger as he declared he could not answer to the American public if such a decision stood. "I resign," he shouted. Eisenhower's answer came back icy and final. His resignation meant nothing, he said, because responsibility to the American people rested with the Supreme Commander, not with Bradley. That clash, buried amid the chaos of Hitler's last offensive, encapsulated 3 years of mounting American resentment toward a man whose brilliance was matched only by his ability to alienate allies. Bernard Montgomery, Britain's desert victor and national hero, had become the most divisive senior commander in the Allied coalition. Admired at home, respected by his troops, he nonetheless inspired irritation, bitterness, and at times outright hostility among the American generals forced to work alongside him. The roots of the friction stretched back to North Africa, long before American divisions were seasoned or confident. The British, veterans of 3 years of war, viewed the Americans as inexperienced newcomers still learning to fight a modern army. Montgomery embodied that assumption completely. He was unquestionably capable, methodical, meticulous, and famously protective of the soldiers under his command. His reputation for careful planning and deliberate operations made him popular in Britain, where families prayed their sons and husbands had the good fortune to serve under him. But American commanders saw another side of him. They saw a man steeped in the British class system, a man whose clipped tone and unconcealed self-assurance conveyed a sense of superiority. To them, Montgomery seemed determined to remind his American partners that the British knew how to fight a war, and the Americans did not. The first real test of this uneasy relationship came after the disaster at Kasserine Pass in February 1943. The U.S. Second Corps had been thrown back by Rommel's veteran German forces, exposing serious deficiencies in American leadership, training, and combined arms tactics. When Lieutenant General George Patton arrived in Tunisia to take command, he found not only a battered force, but also a British command structure convinced that Americans required close supervision. General Sir Harold Alexander, Montgomery's superior, prepared a report that cataloged American weaknesses in harsh detail. Many criticisms were justified, but Alexander's conclusions implied that American forces should be confined to minor roles, while the British executed the campaign's decisive operations. Montgomery, advancing from the east with the battle-hardened 8th Army, reinforced this impression. His demeanor, his confidence, and his battlefield record seemed to underline the British belief that victory would come through British experience, with Americans assisting as needed. Patton saw the danger immediately. If American forces played only supporting roles, they would emerge from the North African campaign overshadowed and dismissed as junior partners. Determined to prove American capability, Patton reorganized Second Corps and demanded aggressive action from his officers and men. The proof came swiftly during the Battle of El Guetar, where American artillery and tank destroyers shattered a German armored attack and held their ground against the 10th Panzer Division. It was the first clear U.S. victory over German armor. Yet the triumph won little attention from Alexander's headquarters, which remained focused on Montgomery's operations.
British staff officers continued issuing detailed instructions to Patton, often changing his objectives with frustrating frequency. To American eyes, the message was obvious. They existed to support Montgomery, not to share in the campaign's leadership or glory. The pattern repeated itself only months later during Operation Husky, the July 1943 invasion of Sicily. The planning for the operation became an early showcase of Montgomery's powerful influence and his equally powerful ability to irritate his allies. The original plan called for widely dispersed landings across the island. Montgomery rejected it outright, arguing that scattering Allied forces invited disaster. He demanded the landings be concentrated at Sicily's southeastern corner, giving himself the clearest possible route to the port of Messina. Air and naval commanders objected. Dispersed landings allowed them to neutralize Axis airfields and minimized naval risk. Montgomery threatened to resign rather than accept the plan, and Churchill supported him. Eisenhower, forced to preserve Allied unity, conceded. The landings were consolidated in Montgomery's favor. The political consequences were unmistakable. The main effort would be British, and the American Seventh Army under Patton would once again be relegated to a supporting role. Patton recognized the implications immediately. Despite commanding a force comparable in size to Montgomery's, Seventh Army was assigned essentially a flank guard mission. His diaries seethed with frustration, particularly after Alexander visited his headquarters, accompanied entirely by British staff officers.
The invasion went forward on July 10th, and both armies secured their beachheads. Patton's forces repelled the determined German counterattack at Gela with the help of naval gunfire. Montgomery's troops pushed inland toward the east coast, confident they would sweep north toward Messina. But German defenses around Catania and the slopes of Mount Etna proved formidable. The British advance stalled. Montgomery's response infuriated the Americans. On July 12th, he informed Alexander, not requested, informed that he intended to widen his operational zone westward, taking over a vital road assigned to the Americans. Seventh Army, he said, should halt and assume a defensive role while Eighth Army conducted the main offensive. Alexander approved the change. To Patton and his officers, the decision demonstrated that British preferences always carried more weight than American capabilities. Seventh Army was once again being pushed aside so Montgomery could dominate the campaign. Patton, though furious, recognized that open defiance was impossible. He outwardly accepted the decision, but immediately searched for a way to give Americans an independent mission. On July 17th, he presented Alexander with a bold proposal. Seventh Army would seize Palermo on Sicily's northwestern coast. The operation would be militarily valuable, supply the Allies with a major port, and, importantly, give the Americans a meaningful strategic objective. Alexander agreed. Patton moved quickly, driving Seventh Army across Sicily